Hello, 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 and welcome to the EUROPA INVICTA show. I'm your host, Alex, and tonight, our main audit will be concerning a topic whose significance to modern society cannot be overstated: the right to free speech. As always, I will focus on the European Union and the other member states on the mother continent, but I will also try to draw parallels to the state of free speech in other nations such as China and the United States of America. Nevertheless, before we get into all of that, let's first try and uncover what has happened during this week's wreckage. Our first segment goes directly to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Keir Starmer's dictatorially inclined regime is imploding. Following the partial release of the Epstein files, his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, has resigned. He did so because he was the architect who advised Keir Starmer to ignore the Epstein warnings and appoint Mandelson as US ambassador in 2024. EFTA files released between the 3rd and 6th of February show that in 2009, then Business Secretary Peter Mandelson sent Epstein a confidential internal report regarding the sale of government assets to Gordon Brown. Now, this is all alleged. We cannot say for certain whether these files have any veracity to them. The reality is that, as we have seen, even the scans are bad. So all of this should be taken with a grain of salt. But it should not fail to raise eyebrows. Hours before the 2010 Eurozone bailout was announced, Mandelson allegedly messaged Epstein, and I've got it right here. The quote: "Sources tell me 500 billion euro bailout is almost complete." End quote. Now, if these files are authentic, this cannot be misconstrued as friendship. This was what looks like insider trading as a form of statecraft. Now, while the UK was drowning in the 2008 financial crash, Mandelson was using the pimp of the grid as a conduit for market-sensitive data. In June 2009, Mandelson reportedly forwarded a Downing Street memo outlining £20 billion in proposed government asset sales directly to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, let me be clear. Mandelson did not just resign. He was effectively foreclosed by the reality of this alleged ledger. The Metropolitan Police have officially opened a criminal investigation into Mandelson for aggravated breach of state secrets. This is the quote: "aggravated breach of state secrets." This, I think, amounts to treason on some level. Now, all of this is alleged, once again. On February 6, police searched his London residence. The ledger auditing the ledger itself. It is kind of funny. There is some comical value in this. As a result of all of this stuff that we've seen in the EFTA imposed DOJ disclosures, Starmer's judgment is now being audited by his very own party. The upbeat and confident PR from Downing Street is a clear sign of administrative panic. This clearly signals the structural weakening of the Starmer regime in the United Kingdom. Now, I'm sure we'll eventually have to do a very deep dive into the post-Brexit situation in the United Kingdom, with Keir Starmer being the cherry on top of a cataclysmic past decade. That's something on the to-do list. Moving forward, Downing Street's janitorial director of comms, Tom whatever the hell, has also resigned. I read why, but honestly, I forgot because it really doesn't matter. It's not like anyone really even liked Keir Starmer, The guy did so many U-turns, whether on issues such as digital ID or immigration, that critics argue he's only ever capable of going in a circle. Critics is me. I am critics. And this is very much a shame, since most young voters were staunch supporters of the Labour Party. They were sick of the Tories, they were sick of everything that was happening with Liz Truss, with all these people that are completely incapable of running the country. And they wanted to do something different. As we've seen before, the left wing and the right wing are all part of the same bird. As such a definite and bitter disappointment will surely radicalize many young people in the United Kingdom towards the far right, which will, in turn, make the state clamp down on free speech even more than it currently does, fueling a socio-political cycle that is so vicious that I foresee it will only end with Big Ben in big flames. I assume that, even with my currently minuscule audience and tiny reach, my current criticism of Keir Stalin will also get me banned from travel to the United Kingdom. Like Eva Vladingerbroek, I also have a clean criminal record in all of the EU states I've visited and I've lived in. So it would definitely track. It would definitely make sense for me to also be banned from entering the UK. Now, at the very least, I have to thank God that I am not a British citizen. So they can't just come at my house and arrest me for speaking against the state, as they have done in the recent past. So much for the British Empire, I guess. Now back on the New World. I was honestly looking forward to the deposition of Ghislaine Maxwell on the 9th of February. Now, Maxwell, imprisoned on charges of human trafficking, pleaded the fifth for every single question during her deposition. Now, sure, it is her constitutional right, but come on. You can say yes in easier ways, with less words. Because what exactly is the fifth? Usually, I mean, this is not correct from a legal standpoint, from a jurisprudence standpoint, but pleading the fifth is akin to saying yes, but not admitting to it, not legally admitting to it. Answering the question in a way that would put you in a negative light without committing perjury, which is a prosecutable offense. It is a crime. Now, all of this is nothing new. These people would give their life for the horde. Still, I can't help but feel like the situation remains absurdly comical. Apparently, if we are going to take Ghislaine Maxwell's word, she trafficked these kids to absolutely nobody. Splendid, isn't it? Quite wonderful. Now, continuing with news from the New World, where Britain apparently thinks it's located, Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie and Californian Democrat Ro Khanna have named 6 men who were previously redacted as Epstein co-conspirators. Now, I want to clarify one thing. These men, the Department of Justice said they would only redact names to maintain the privacy of the victims. From what I've been seeing across the pond, that has not been the case. These 6 people are, allegedly, Salvatore Nuara, which is an alleged financial fixer, Zurab Mikeladze, an alleged Georgian oligarch link, Leonik Leonov, an alleged Russian infrastructure node, Nicola Caputo, an alleged European parliamentary node, and Leslie Wexner, which is a billionaire founder of L Brands. So she allegedly listed in a 2019 FBI document as a co-conspirator. And finally, the cherry on top, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the CEO of DP World of Dubai. And regarding this last guy, the files allegedly link him to the torture video email where Epstein wrote, "I love the torture video." Truly a normal thing to say. The files allegedly show an additional 4,700 mentions and persistent ties post-2008 conviction between the Sultan and Mr. Epstein. And regarding Nicola Caputo, I do have to mention, I think I'm legally required to mention, that the former European Union Member of Parliament denied any involvement with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, stating that he is not the Nicola Caputo mentioned in the files. Make of that what you will. It is very possible. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in name etymology, so I'm not sure how often we see Nicola Caputo in Italy. But whatever. That's what he says. Honestly, we don't have any other counter argument to this. There just isn't any. So we cannot rebuke his claims. He may as well be right. Might as well. Now, back to the mother continent. Yves Brun-Pivet, president of the French National Assembly and member of Renaissance, Emmanuel Macron's party, has publicly opposed and blocked the formation of a parliamentary investigative commission centered on Epstein and his ties to French nationals. She's claiming it would, and I quote, compete with the justice system. By limiting the investigation to tax fraud, the French elites are performing an administrative downgrade. They are treating a systemic leverage and trafficking operation as a fiscal accounting error to prevent the audit from reaching the Élysée. Multiple other EU states have begun legal investigations in alleged involvements of their own nationals with Jeffrey Epstein, but let's be realistic. Nothing ever happens. And moving forward with the news cycle, we have an obligation to discuss a monumental development in the political landscape of Japan. The ruling LDP now has a supermajority in parliament all on its own, which is even bigger when you take into account the coalition members. This is something that has never been before seen for a singular Japanese party since 1945. They won all 23 special wards, the western cities and the island regions of Tokyo, accounting to all of Tokyo's voting districts. All 30 of them, in an unprecedented result for the capital. The Japanese people have spoken. They have given LDP, headed by Sanae Takaichi, a mandate to completely implement all of the changes that they have been championing. Let's make this perfectly clear. This level of political leverage grants the LDP the ability to unilaterally amend the Constitution of Japan. This has never happened before in the history of post-World War II Japan. As soon as partial results came in, the Defense Ministry of Japan has already called for swift amendments to the Japanese Constitution. And now, Sanae Takaichi has the numbers to execute the Article 9 revision. What does this mean? It means that for the first time since the end of the Pacific Theater of World War II, since 1945, the Japanese island and its people, one of the strongest and most culturally hermetic people in the world, is preparing to liquidate its pacifist operating system and rearm as a primary military node in Eastern Asia. This is the kinetic re-leveraging of Asia to counter the lunar corridor created by threats mentioned in the Pentagon report from China. Now, that's mostly it for the major news, but I do want to touch on some topics that haven't made the rounds internationally, but that I believe need to be known. 1 second. Hydration break. So, starting off, I want to preemptively excuse my terrible pronunciation. Down under in Brazil, Luís Felipe de Orleans e Bragança, a descendant of the Imperial House of Brazil, has successfully pushed the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies to reject the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I wanted to say on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Hence the stutter. Now, his argument is clinical. Let's ignore my stutter. His argument is airtight. In a dynamic conflict system, a nation without a nuclear deterrent is a nation without a future. And we have seen this with Ukraine. They have given up all of the nuclear weapons. All of the nuclear weapons that ended up in their possession as a result of the breakup of the USSR. And now are fighting a war for their very existence. While that line of thinking may have its merits, let's not forget that nuclear proliferation is one of the main dangers of modern human existence. More nukes is not more better. That shouldn't even need to be said. Now, thousands of miles away from Brazil, Roskomnadzor has begun throttling Telegram in Russia, targeting media and voice calls. Pavel Durov's response is the terminal point of our main audit. The state is trying to force citizens onto state-controlled apps built for surveillance. This is the Digital Services Act, the DSA, with a Russian accent. As for last week's segment on Iran, the facts are simple. Trump has met with Rupert Murdoch, a renowned Zionist, on the 11th of February. This meeting comes a day before Netanyahu, and notably his wife, who almost never joins Big Yahoo in diplomatic missions, come to DC to advocate for aggressive action in Iran. And the meeting was supposed to take, 60 minutes. It was reportedly over 200 minutes, I think it was 300 minutes or so. That's crazy. Netanyahu has met the day before with Witkoff and Kushner at the Blair House, discussing regional issues and the ongoing talks with Iran in Muscat. Let's be clear. Benny isn't here for a nuclear deal. He is going to the Blair House and to the White House to demand a sweeping rollback of Iran's regional presence and to crush any sort of progress done during the meetings in Muscat. The Israelis will not be happy with just a nuclear deal. They want more. They want to be the primary node of power in the Middle East. And they are willing to send the free world into war to achieve their dream. And last, but certainly not least, Florida news. Gubernatorial candidate James Fishback, who is running on a firmly America First and anti-Israel platform of liquidating H-1B visas and taxing OnlyFans extraction, and whose political presence we may very well audit in a future video. He is a very interesting character, and I think his rise is something that needs to be studied. He was the target of an arson attack at his Madison home. This is kinetic censorship. If the managers can't audit your arguments, they try to audit your physical presence. It doesn't even matter who physically lights the match. It's almost never a crazed individual, as the mainstream media always wants you to believe. That is a tired psyop. Just the same, I don't want to make light of this. I don't want to use these tragedies as a crux in my points, but just the same with the shootings in Maryland and British Columbia, where we're supposed to extrapolate garbage conclusions from the identities of the perpetrators and apply those garbage ideas to whole entire ideological groups. The shooter in Tumble Ridge, transgender man. Well, I don't know how you say it. He was a man, became a woman, that type of thing. I don't know. So what, now we're supposed to believe that all of these people are completely, mentally unsound? To the point where they would murder others? The facts of the case have not yet been completely brought to the public's attention, but I do want to say that it would be disgusting to live in a world where I can't trust the guy next to me on the bus because he might be crazy, regardless of if he's black, like the guy who killed Irina last year. If he's white, like all of these school shooters who apparently are predominantly white. If he looks like a guy but not entirely, then I should be scared as well. This is not the world I want to live in. And this is not a slippery slope I will go down on. And I will champion the idea that we should not be taking all of this out of context and try to paint entire segments of the population as monsters. This is not what the show is about. This is not what I am about. But this attempt to do this exact thing is pure kinetic censorship. Back to James Fishback, Madison County Fire Rescue and the Sheriff's Office have confirmed they have no open investigation into the fire at Fishback's home, despite it being intentionally set in his yard. The state won't even audit the fire that tried to silence the candidate. As we'll see within the following principal audit of today's episode, even silence can be a form of censorship. Let's stop pretending. Let's stop pretending that the difference between the United States and Europe is just culture or healthcare or metric versus imperial. What's a gallon? What the hell is a kilometer? No. The difference is that in America, speech is a divine right. It is an inherent biological function of a sovereign human being. The state does not grant it to you. The state is constitutionally handcuffed from touching it in any which way. But here, in the European Union, no. Speech is not a right. It is a government lease. I would urge you to look at Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It looks pretty on paper, doesn't it? Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. But then you read the fine print. Paragraph 2. It says this freedom carries with it, and I quote, duties and responsibilities. That is the trap. That is the lock on the cage. A right that carries duties is not a right, it is a privilege, it is a utility. Like your water or your electricity. And just like your electricity, just like your water, the managers can shut it off the moment you stop paying your bill. Now, what is the bill for speech, you may ask? Compliance. In 2026, the cost of speaking in Europe is that you must never, ever offend the managerial class or their protected pets. They have built an entire legal framework from the Wexler Law from the Wechsler law in Romania to the Yadan bill in France, based on the idea that your feelings are more important than my facts. Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean himself, a man who understands that satire is the only weapon against tyranny, has warned us about this a few years ago. He called it the creeping culture of censoriousness. He told us, and I quote, that the freedom to be inoffensive is no freedom at all. And he was right, because offense is the immune system of a free society. Think about it. How do you build a biological immune system? You get exposed to germs, you get exposed to dirt, to bacteria, to the things that make you sick. Your body learns to fight them, and you get stronger. Now, speech works the same way. When you hear something offensive, when you hear a lie, a slur, a radical idea, your mind builds the antibodies to fight it. You learn to argue, you learn to debate, you learn to dissect. You learn to reject the lie and defend the truth. But what happens when the state builds a sterile bubble around your mind? What happens when the Digital Services Act deletes every harmful thought before it ever reaches your screen, before it ever reaches the public square? What happens when the Yadan law threatens you with 7 years in prison for implicitly provoking someone? I'll tell you what you get. You get linguistic AIDS. Your society loses its immune system. You become soft. You become fragile. You become a nation of traumatized toddlers, and a nation at that, because the European nation, the European family, is a nation in and of itself. A nation of traumatized toddlers who need a manager in a police uniform to come and put a pacifier in your mouth because someone on the internet said words you didn't like. They are not protecting you from hate speech. They are surgically removing your ability to process reality. They want you weak. They want you offended. Because a population that cannot handle words certainly cannot handle the Epstein files. A population that cries over misgendering certainly isn't going to storm the barricades when Peter Mandelson sells off their country's assets for pennies on the euro. This is the germ theory of tyranny. They sterilize the environment so that the moment a real virus shows up, a virus like the 2026 default, or the biometric cage, or the Epstein files, you have no defense mechanism left. You just lay down and die because you were never allowed to build the strength to say no. So tonight, we are going to audit the sterile bubble. We are going to look at the cases of ES in Austria, Rabczewska in Poland, and I'm sorry for butchering that, and the Mediengruppe blackout. We are going to see exactly what happens when you try to introduce a germ of truth into a hospital run by lunatics. I got a little bit too fired up there. To facilitate the forensic dissection of this linguistic cage, we must first map the fundamental fracture that makes it possible. We need to audit the global landscape, China, the US, Russia, Canada, Australia, to provide the necessary benchmarks for the European collapse. It is only through a thorough understanding of the global context that we can truly comprehend the abominable state of the prime right of human existence across our beautiful continent. Of course, I'm going to focus more on the United States, since they're basically Europeans with a different hat. Let's define this ideological fracture. We are faced with two poles of thought. To the sovereign, speech is a divine right. To the grid, speech is an administrative permission. Speech is the biological expression of the human soul. It is the tool used to manifest truth into the physical world. Now, whether that truth is subjective or objective is irrelevant to the mechanism. All truths must be expressed so that the court of public opinion can audit their validity. In this model, the state has no jurisdiction over what you say because it didn't give you the ability to speak. You speak no less naturally than you breathe, blink, or smile. This is the Atkinsonian perspective. The second most, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, the second most precious thing in your life, or in life in general, is the ability to express yourself freely. Right after the ability to sustain life with food, and right before the need for shelter. But in Europe, we have allowed a secondary perspective to entrench itself in our legal ledgers. This perspective considers speech to be a lease granted by a treaty like the European Convention on Human Rights. The elites allow you to speak as long as your words don't threaten the consensus or the public order. If you breach the terms of the lease, if you audit the bankruptcy of the state, the managers terminate your access to the digital square. They implement direct, kinetic strikes against your person. And the interpretation of this lease lies firmly at the whims of the European Court of Human Rights, which, apart from the fancy name and the imposing buildings, is nothing more than a final, impenetrable bulwark against dissent. To understand how far we have fallen, we must look at the last node of operational absolutism, the United States of America. Under the First Amendment, there is no such thing as hate speech. The only restriction was established by the Supreme Court in 1969 in Brandenburg v. Ohio. The government cannot punish speech unless it is directed to inciting imminent lawless action. So saying, go kill someone, go burn down the Capitol building. January 6th. Other than that, everything goes. Now, let's dissect the extreme cases to show you the difference between a citizen, a sovereign citizen, and a managed subject. And I will start with Exhibit A, the right-wing extremes. Now, one topic most analysts refuse to touch is historical revisionism. In the US, denying the Holocaust is protected speech. Why? Because under the First Amendment, there is no such thing as a false idea. The remedy for the lie is the truth, not the prison cell. But in at least 16 European countries, including Germany, France, Austria, and Romania, this is a criminal offense. In Germany, under Section 130, Volksverhetzung, approving or glorifying or denying the Nazi regime can give you 5 years in prison. The state itself has decided that you are too stupid to hear a lie without believing it. So it puts the lie in a cage to protect you. The second example from the far right is the Westboro Baptist Church. In 2011, the US Supreme Court ruled that they had the right to protest military funerals with highly offensive, homophobic signs. The court ruled that even outrageous speech on public issues is protected. In Europe, that is classified as harassment or incitement. Under the ECHR's Duties and Responsibilities Clause, such speech is suppressed because the managers deem it has no value to the debate. They claim the right to filter your input based on their assessment of its value. And finally, let's talk about the symbols. In the United States, the 1977 Skokie case, Skokie, I don't really know hard to pronounce it, confirmed that National Socialists have a right to march and display the four-legged wheel. In Germany and France, displaying the four-legged symbol, or the dual lightning rune, is an immediate arrest. Now, you should note the self-censored language I am using right now. These restrictions don't just suppress my expression. They suppress my ability to even discuss the suppression. To call this ridiculous is a massive understatement. It is administrative gaslighting. Then we have the left. This is Exhibit B. The first point is as follows. The US Supreme Court ruled in Texas v. Johnson that burning the American flag on American soil is protected symbolic speech. It is an extreme form of anti-state expression that is perfectly legal. In France, insulting the national anthem or flag at a government event is a fine and imprisonment. Fine plus imprisonment plus punch. In Germany, defamation of the state is defined and is legally precarious. The state protects its own symbols while stripping you of yours. The second point is blasphemy. What about it? Now, in the United States, the Satanic Temple can mock religious institutions freely. In Europe, the religious peace doctrine intervenes. I've read ECHR files, kind of tired of it, kind of bored of it, but nevertheless, we shall keep going with them. They hold some very valuable data that shows what a shit show this absolutely is. In Sabadich-Wolf v. Austria, the European Court of Human Rights upheld a conviction for criticizing Islam because the state has and I quote, a duty to suppress speech that hurts religious feelings. Let me repeat that quote. A duty to suppress. Let that fucking sink in. This language is public knowledge. It's open to your viewing. I will actually leave the link below. Now I'll give you some pointers of where to look for it. Isn't this insane? A duty to suppress. And finally, my main point, the BDS movement, boycotting and all that stuff. In the United States, boycotting Israel for the current military action in Gaza is protected political speech. In France, the High Court has ruled that calling for such a boycott is incitement to discrimination, leading to criminal convictions. The framework is rigged to protect the geopolitical status quo. But don't get too comfortable looking across the Atlantic. The American node is undergoing a managerial coup. The global censorship export from Brussels is being used as a backdoor to bypass the US Constitution via terms of service. If big tech refuses to pay the 6% global revenue fine, they have to comply. Furthermore, the refusal to investigate criminal acts against dissenters, like the arson attack on James Fishback, is a sly attempt at subversive deletion. When the grid sits idly by while radicalized citizens perform kinetic judgment on a candidate only to claim they are neutral, your rights are dead. The betrayal is coming from inside the house. And then we have the Celestial Empire. Beijing, through the social credit system, and this pretty much seals my fate, I will never be able to visit China because I'm saying this, has achieved the managerial dream. Speech is not just a legal liability, it is a biological one. If you speak against the party node, you don't just get a fine, you lose the ability to buy a train ticket. Your biometric wallet freezes. This is the synthetic shoebox fully realized. And thanks to the Digital Services Act, it is the model currently being imported to Brussels without any sort of restrictions. But if China is the biological cage, then Russia is the kinetic shield. In the Russian node, censorship isn't soft. It isn't about protecting your feelings or stopping disinformation. No. It is about the geopolitical node. The receipt is the 2022 legislation against, and I quote, discrediting the armed forces. And it sounds very bureaucratic, doesn't it? But the logic is medieval. If you question the narrative in Moscow, you aren't just a wrong thinker or a Western troll. You are legally reclassified as a foreign agent. Questioning the main line of the state brands you a traitor. You are stripped of your status as a citizen and branded as an enemy combatant in the information war. The penalty isn't a strike on the channel. It is 15 years in a penal colony on the Far East. They have replaced the concept of public discourse with state security. Speech is only protected if it serves the fortress. If you dissent, you are sabotaging the walls, and in a fortress under siege, sabotage is treason. The logic is simple. But it is, nonetheless, extremely tragic. Now let's move on from this heavy stuff and go on to heavier stuff. The polite tyrannies of the Commonwealth, Canada and Australia are interesting examples. This is where the linguistic liquidation is most advanced. It's not kinetic, it's therapeutic. In Canada, we have the Online Harms Act, Bill C-63. In Australia, the Combating Misinformation Bill. The logic here is terrifyingly simple. Speech is restricted to prevent subjective harm. They don't need to prove you lied. They don't need to prove you incited violence. They just need to prove that a manager felt unsafe because of your audit. If your critique of the government causes emotional distress to a group of protected people, deleted. If your investigation into the banking system causes institutional distrust, deleted. They have weaponized safety. They treat your words like a physical assault. In the Canadian node, they are even discussing pre-crime warrants, house arrests, get this, for things they fear you might say in the future, for the fear that you may commit hate speech in the future. This is the Minority Report run by HR ladies. And finally, the communal threshold. India and the Middle East. Here, the logic is collective enforcement. The receipt is found in India's IT rules and the Gulf states' cybercrime laws. The operating system here is different. It's not really about the individual, it's about the collective piece. Speech is restricted to prevent communal disharmony. If you criticize a religious practice in a way that disturbs the public order, liquidated. You post a meme If you post a meme that insults the dignity of the ruling family, boom, liquidated. Easy. There's no discussion, bro. In these nodes, the individual is a sacrificial lamb. The managers will happily burn your rights to keep the community warm. And they call this social harmony? I call it peace at the end of a gun. So why does all of this matter? Why am I taking you on a tour of global tyranny? Because Europe, as it stands, is synthesizing them all. The European Union is building a monster. They are taking China's biometric control. They are taking Russia's foreign agent paranoia. They are taking Canada's subjective safety logic. And they are taking the Middle East blasphemy laws. They're combining every single form of censorship into one singular master key called the Digital Services Act. And if you want to see what that looks like in practice, if you want to see what happens when the duty to suppress meets the right to reintegration, you don't. We have the receipts. But they need a legal justification. They need a way to tell you that censorship is actually freedom. And to do that, they use a little trick called the margin of appreciation. This is the doctrine that says states have a degree of leeway to limit your rights based on local cultural norms. It sounds respectful, doesn't it? It sounds like they're respecting sovereignty. I'm here to tell you that they aren't. They are respecting tyranny. Let's dissect the 3 cases that prove the emperor in Europe is not just protected from violence, but from indignation. And we'll start with case number 1, ESV Austria. A woman in Austria holds a seminar. She discusses the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad to Aisha. She quotes the historical texts, she points out the age of the bride, and she calls it what it looks like to the modern eye. What happened? Did the state debate her? Did they prove her wrong? Did they oblige her? Did they obligate her to have a discussion with a Muslim imam and actually try and understand why she's wrong or why she's right? No, they convicted her. The Austrian courts said that she was disparaging religious doctrine. They said her words were capable of arousing justified indignation. And the European Court of Human Rights upheld it. Why? Because they said the state has an obligation to ensure religious peace. They ruled that presenting objects of worship in a provocative way is a malicious violation of the spirit of tolerance. Think about phrasing. The spirit of tolerance. They use the word tolerance to justify putting a woman in a cage for speaking her mind. They prioritize the feelings of the believer over the facts of the speaker. If this is not insane, I honestly don't know what is. Let's look at case number 2. Rabczewska v. Poland. The pop star Doda gives an interview. She says she believes in science, not the Bible. She says the Bible was written by guys who were, and I quote, wasted from drinking wine and smoking some weed. End of quote. She was convicted, fined for offending religious feelings. Now, eventually, the ECHR ruled in her favor, but look why they ruled for her. Did they say she had a divine right to blaspheme? No. They ruled for her because her statements did not amount to an improper or abusive attack likely to incite religious intolerance. They let her off the hook because she wasn't dangerous enough. They ruled that her frivolous pop star vibe didn't threaten public order. Do you see the trap? Your right to speak depends entirely on whether the manager thinks you're a threat to their peace or not. If you are a serious critic like ES, you go to jail. If you are a frivolous celebrity like Dota, you get a pass. This law is not a law, it is a vibe check. And case number 3 is the right to lie. It exposes that. And this is the one that should terrify you. Mediengruppe Österreich v. Austria. This case is basically what a newspaper publishes a photo of a man. They call him a convicted neo-Nazi. Is it true? Yes. He was convicted. He was a neo-Nazi. But the court ruled against the newspaper. Why? Because it had been 20 years. They ruled that the man had a legitimate, and I quote this, a legitimate and significant interest, end quote, in no longer being confronted with his conviction. They call it the right to reintegration. I call it the right to amnesia. The court effectively ruled that the truth, that this man was a neo-Nazi, was incomplete because it didn't mention he had been good for the last 17 years. So the state ordered the newspaper to stop printing the truth to protect the reputation of a man who tried to dismantle the constitutional order. This is the historical foreclosure. If the managers decide that a fact is old or harmful to someone's new identity, they can delete it from the public record. Now I know what some of you may be thinking, oh, Alex, why are you defending blasphemers? Why are you defending people who insult the prophet or the Bible? Let me be crystal clear. For anyone who believes that I would oppose the creation and distribution of such films, such statements, such music, such art, such commentary, you do not understand that my firm belief in unrestricted, free, and apologetically public speech is unwavering. I know, I'm a relatively recent convert to Catholicism. I myself would never take the Lord's name in vain. I believe in the sacred wholeheartedly. But I will bleed for your right to not believe in the sacred, no matter the cost. Because if I allow the state to silence you for insulting my God, I have given them the weapon they will use to silence me when I speak the truth about their crimes. This isn't about protecting God. God doesn't need the European Court of Human Rights to defend his honor. This is about protecting sovereignty. These rulings, Otto Preminger, Wingrove, yes, they are the foundation of the rot. They codify a system where the vibe of the community outweighs the sovereignty of the speaker. And that brings us to the slap. Why do we do this? Why do we spend hours digging through court documents and ECHR filings? Because if you don't understand, if you don't realize that the Wechsler law in Romania and the Yadan bill in France are just European accents of the Chinese Communist Party's operating system, you will walk into the shoebox voluntarily. You will walk in blind, stupid, and without knowing how much better this can all truly be. They tell you they are protecting you from hate. But hate is just a code word for information the managers can't audit. If they control the dictionary, they control the thinking. If they control the thinking, they control the fortress. And now they have the legal framework. Now that they have a legal framework, they need a mechanism to enforce it. They need a machine that can apply these vibe checks to 450 million people in real time. Next, we move into the clinical autopsy of the Digital Services Act, the digital garrote that makes this global nightmare a physical reality in Europe. You have the laws, you have the Wechsler trap in Romania, you have the Yadan trap in France, you have the European Court of Human Rights giving the managers the duty to suppress, but laws are just paper. To control 450 million souls, you don't need paper, you need a machine. And that machine is the Digital Services Act. they sold it to you as safety. They told you it was about stopping disinformation and illegal content. They lied. They lied like they always do. The DSA is the digital garrote of the human mind in Europe. We have a duty to open up the hood and see how this engine actually runs. And right off the bat, there's a few components that jump out. The first one being the trusted flaggers. This is the most insidious part of the machine. The state knows it cannot police every tweet, every video, every telegram message. So, what did they do? In classic globalist fashion, they outsourced it. The DSA creates a special class of entities called trusted flaggers. These aren't judges, they aren't juries, they are NGOs. They are civil society groups. Most of them are funded by the very managers who wrote the law. And under the DSA, when one of these trusted flaggers reports your content, the platform must prioritize it. They don't have to prove you broke the law in a court. They just have to flag you as a systemic risk. And this is exactly the second component that pops up, the systemic risk clause. This is the trapdoor. The DSA forces platforms like X, YouTube, and Meta to perform annual audits to mitigate systemic risks. Let's dissect it for a second, please. What is a systemic risk? Is it a bomb threat? Is it child exploitation? Sure, but in 2026, it is also defined as anything that affects civil discourse or electoral processes. If you question the integrity of an election, systemic risk. If you audit the demographic changes in your city, systemic risk. If you criticize the Green Deal during a climate emergency, systemic risk. The managers have redefined safety to mean the security of the narrative. If you poke a hole in their story, you aren't just a critic. You are a safety hazard. The third component keeps jumping up and desires this this analysis, and that is the 6% bullet, which is why these platforms even comply. Why does someone like Elon Musk, who talks a big game about free speech, have to bend the knee in Europe? Pause. I despise Elon Musk. This is not an endorsement, okay? But his right to speech should be protected as well. So why does he bend the knee in Europe? It is because of the fiscal gun. The penalty for non-compliance to the DSA is 6% of global annual turnover, not profit, turnover. For a company like Meta or Alphabet, that is billions upon billions of dollars. It is a liquidation event. The EU, through these mechanisms, has effectively held the American tech sector hostage. They say, enforce our censorship or we will bankrupt you. And finally, there is the crisis response mechanism that is fundamentally the kill switch of this entire thing. The DSA gives the European Commission the power to declare what is known as a crisis situation. A pandemic, a war, a security threat. When that button is pressed, the debate ends. The Commission can mandate exactly what measures platforms must take to contain the crisis. They can order the suppression of harmful narratives instantly. We saw a preview of this in 2020, but that was ad hoc, that was amateur hour. The DSA is professionalized tyranny. It is a system where the Wexler law is the software and the DSA is the hardware. One criminalizes your history, the other deletes your defense. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in the organic fortress. They have built the cage, they have locked the doors. They have handed the keys to the trusted flaggers. But they forgot one thing. A cage only works as long as you don't step outside of it. They can ban the legionary archetype, they can ban the critique of Islam, they can ban the historical audit, but they cannot ban the truth. They can only hide it. And the funny part, the absolutely mind-boggling part, is that the more they hide it, the more valuable it becomes. The Wechsler Law didn't kill the memory of the resistance. It made it sacred. It sanctified the legionary movement. The add-on bill didn't stop the critique of the managers. It just proved that they are terrified of us. The DSA didn't sanitize the internet. It just drove real conversations into the shadows, where we are stronger, sharper, and harder to kill, but at the same time where everyone is mixed up in the same environment, regardless of beliefs. And now, because I dissent against this, I will be labeled a neo-Nazi, a fascist, a whatever, anti-Semitic, or all of this. No! Leave me alone! Just leave me alone. This isn't the point. Rowan Atkinson was right. The freedom to be inoffensive is no freedom at all. So let's try and be more offensive. Let's try and be systemic risks. Let's try and be the germs that the sterile bubble cannot survive. So why are we here? Because we are paralyzed. Because we are currently trapped in a false dichotomy engineered by the very architecture of the grid. They want you to believe there are only two choices. Choice one, the tiger. This is the insatiable tiger of fascism. This is what they scare you with every night on the news. Chaos, mob, rule, the purge. The idea that if we let people speak freely, the streets will run with blood and the far right will eat the poor. Then there's choice number two, the spider. This is the technocratic spider of Brussels. This is the solution they offer you. Control, censorship, the nanny state. The warm, suffocating embrace of the DSA where every thought is wrapped in silk and every harmful idea is dissolved before it can hurt you. The conclusion? They tell you that you must choose the spider to save you from the tiger. But they are lying. You cannot choose between them. Because the spider creates the tiger. The spider tries to cage the tiger by silencing speech, by passing the Wechsler Law, by using the ECHR to crush dissent. And what happens? The tiger gets hungry. The tiger gets angry. And the tiger tries to eat the spider by burning down the institutions. Both lead to the same destination, the destruction of the high-trust society. If you cannot have, no if, you simply cannot have a high-trust society when half the population is terrified of mob rule and the other half is terrified of state censorship. You just have a prison riot. So how do we escape this trap? How do we kill the spider without unleashing the tiger? We escape by changing the architecture completely. 1 second. The public square has been privatized by algorithms that monetize friction. Facebook, X, YouTube, they don't want free speech and they don't want censorship. They want engagement. Let's be frank about this. And the easiest way to get engagement is to make you angry. CGP Grey has a great video about this regarding ideas and why angry ideas propagate so much faster than every other idea. These platforms force feed you the tiger to make you beg for the spider. But there is a fix. We must decouple the right to speak from the right to amplify. You have the absolute divine right to say remigration. You have the right to quote the Epstein files. You have the right to audit the state, but you have no right to have a corporate algorithm force feed that idea to a stranger who didn't ask for it. The mechanism is simple. We move from platforms to middleware. Imagine a world where you control the filter and the state does not. If you want to see the tiger, if you want the raw, unfiltered feed of global consciousness, you turn that dial up. You own that risk. If you want the safe space, if you want to block the slurs and the hate, you turn that dial down. You choose, not a bureaucrat in Brussels, not a technocrat in Silicon Valley, not a trusted flagger at an NGO. You. This is user sovereignty. And the outcome is clear. When you strip away the algorithmic amplification, the viral engine of hate is turned off. Good ideas find their people naturally. Bad ideas die in the dark. And at the end, we are left with organic human connection. So this really does kill two birds with one stone. We don't need the spider to protect us, and we don't need the tiger to avenge us. We just need the sovereignty to speak and the maturity to listen. This is the only way out of the cage. It's not about left or right. It's about protocol over platform. And I will leave you with a poignant excerpt from the ancient ledger. John chapter 3, verses 20 and 21 say as such. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light. Do not let them keep you in the dark. I'll leave you with another quote from a very famous man of history. Let me know down in the comments, of course, after liking and subscribing, because I'm obligated to say that for engagement, who this quote belongs to. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to take a stand for that which is true. We must fight for the right to say the truth. We must pressure our leaders to allow us to speak our truth. For men without fight will have their truth swallowed up by entropy. The truth we see with our own eyes, the truth we hear with our own ears, the truth we know is true. My name is Alex. This is EUROPA INVICTA. Sovereignty or extinction. And the future belongs to the sovereign. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week, or on Telegram, or on all of the other platforms. Good night.